speeding tickets. Nobody likes them. And on paper, the rules are simple. Obey the limit, it keeps people safe, and just carry on. Now, I'm pretty chill on the road. I rarely drive above the speeding limit, but I've definitely noticed that doing that irritates people almost all the time. For many, maybe even most people, driving slightly over the speed limit is pretty common. Try going just a few kilometers over in a community safety zone, and weeks later, you're likely to get a ticket in the post, possibly for a camera you never even saw. We're told that this calms traffic, that it increases safety, and reduces serious injury. But does it? So why do we keep seeing ordinary drivers nicked for road behavior that a live officer possibly wouldn't even noticed in the past or stopped you for? The locations of these cameras are pretty clever. The thresholds for them to capture you going over is pretty low, and the court pipeline hums along while families wonder why their mailbox feels a little bit full. My guest has been through the grinder on this topic. Journalist and historian John Robson picked up 4 photo radar tickets in Ottawa and decided to push back. He wrote about it in the C2C Journal in a piece called Hot Tickets, My Role in the Coming Downfall of Speed Cameras. And he's going to spell out why this setup offends the most basic fairness and common sense principles. I'm Melanie Bennett. This is Disrupted. John Robson, thank you so much for joining me today.
A pleasure to be here.
Maybe I shouldn't giggle, but I did have a few giggles at your article from the C2C Journal, Hot Tickets, My Role in the Coming Downfall of Speed Cameras. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. But before we get into the speed cameras, there was one element of the article, which is not quite speed cameras, that I want to open up with. It was this motorist in 1995 who, what's his name here? It's Thompson. Gord Thompson of Campbellford drove on the Highway 401 at exactly the speed limit, so at the time 100 kilometers an hour, with his friend on the second lane, also driving 100 kilometers an hour. And for being a law-abiding citizen, shall we call him, he was charged with careless driving and obstructing a highway. What's up with that?
It's a classic illustration of the fact that the speed limit in this country is not meant to be enforced literally. I don't know, careless driving. He was very carefully driving down one lane at the speed limit. But the point is that if you drive at the posted speed limit on any road, you will back up traffic for an enormous distance because it is not the speed at which people drive, nor is it the speed at which they should drive. And the fact that you're not allowed to go over the speed limit and you're also not to go at the speed limit indicates that there is something wrong with the law, partially fixed by the fact that nobody ever enforced it, right? Nobody in the history of the human race has gotten a ticket for going 105 on the 401, at least. I mean, not when, daylight and so on. If there was a howling blizzard and stuff, you might. But it dramatizes my point in fighting these photo radar tickets that the posted speed limit is not meant to be enforced.
So taking you back, so we'll go into the speed cameras now, because as you said, no one has been given a ticket for driving 105 in a 100 zone on a highway. But in your article, it's very clear that people are getting a number of tickets for driving a few kilometers over the speeding limit in certain zones. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and the background to it is, and I think this is important to the story, that I hadn't had a speeding ticket anywhere in the world in 25 years. So I don't want people to think that I'm a scofflaw or a dangerous driver. I drive at traffic speed. I drive responsibly. And suddenly, bing, 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 I got 4 tickets in the space of about a year in Ottawa, 3 of them from the same intersection. And when the first one arrived, initially I thought it was on some other matter, and I opened it and I saw that one was for going, I think, 62 in a 50 zone. And I thought this was a prank. Because nobody, again, assuming that the traffic conditions are good, they're not weaving between lanes, they're not doing anything else, smoking a big joint there at the wheel, nobody gets a ticket for going 62 in a 50 zone. No human police officer would ever pull you over for doing that. The police do it. The judges do it. The politicians do it. And so I thought, well, there's something unreasonable about this. And then I got a flurry of them. And I realized that what they were doing is a dirty trick. They were taking normal behavior that everybody engages in and criminalizing it for profit. That they were not interested in traffic safety. This is a highway robber in a stolen vest. They were interested in getting the money out of your pocket and into theirs because governments cannot manage their finances. There's one place down in southwestern Ontario where they're looking to increase the number of tickets they give out by a factor of 12 in the next 4 years. Why? Because Canadians are bad drivers? No, because they desperately need the money. And so I decided I would fight this. I said, I'm going to go to court. I'm going to cite the charter. I'm going to say we live under the rule of law. And part of the rule of law is having standing rules, as John Locke says, that people know about and are made with their consent. And everybody knows you don't get penalized for going slightly over the speed limit. And we would never consent to such a rule. And so, of course, I was laughed out of court, but that was predictable because the government is so desperate for money. And frankly, the people who preside over traffic courts work hand in glove with the prosecutors to empty your pocket. It's not a normal court setup where the executive branch is squaring off against the citizen with an independent judicial overseer. It's just to shear the sheep as fast as possible and move on.
So let's go back to the safety element, because the idea behind speeding cameras and being more effective in catching drivers is that, I imagine if you give them a ticket, if somebody has a penalty for driving too fast in, let's say, a restricted zone, so maybe it's a school zone and so on and so forth, that will calm traffic and that will be safer for people in those zones. Is there evidence for that actually being the case?
No, that's a complete lie. And you know it's a lie because if they stationed a human officer there with a speed camera, what they would do is pull over the people who are going way too fast. And so if they had calibrated these cameras in such a way that they gave you a ticket if you were going 70 in a 50 zone or 85 in a 60 zone, that kind of thing, yeah, because the couple of things that really are known to kill, and one of them is very high speeds and another one is speed differentials. But the idea that a machine should ticket you for going 12 or 14 kilometers over the limit when a human officer wouldn't means it's not about the safety. And the other thing is it's not worth their time to have the whole police force out there ticketing people for going 14 kilometers over, but speed cameras empty your pocket cheaply. So it's a complete act of plunder. And another thing, you don't lose points for it because they can't prove you were at the wheel. Whereas when a police officer pulls you over, it's fairly obvious that, yes, this is me and the chair officer. So they are actually lying rather more brazenly even than the authorities normally lie. It's about the revenue. And again, you look at the place where they're planning to give everybody a ticket every year. Do they think everybody is a bad driver and is creating a safety hazard? No. Do they want them to slow down? No. They want them to get the tickets because they need the money. And as I did tell one justice of the peace, the state's fiscal incontinence is not my concern. My concern is living under rules that we understand and consented to. And again, as they say in one of the Federalists talks about this, that it's no use having laws you make yourself if they're so complicated or change so often that you can't know what they are. And the trick with photo radar is you don't know that on this particular stretch of road, which looks like any other innocent stretch of road, you can't drive at the speed you can drive everywhere else. That's how they catch you. That's how they trick you. And as I said again to one of the justices of the peace, this is dirty. This is not a change they announced and told us from now on this particular 3-block stretch of the road, you have to slow down weirdly, and then you can go back to what you were doing. If they told us that, we'd do it and they wouldn't give out any tickets. But they want to give out the tickets because they need the money. So this whole thing about safety is pious fraud.
So you mentioned, was it the town of Welland, am I mistaken, that wanted to ticket everybody?
I'll just check
the
that
revenue?
because I think you're right. It's County Wellington that wants to... That managed to give out 7% of all drivers during one period got a ticket, and it's Waterloo that plans to go from 70,000 to 875,000 in 4 years.
Do we know where the money is going?
It's going to the usual, salaries, inefficiency, social programs that don't achieve their goals, whatever it is that government is doing. But if government can't afford what it's doing on the basis of its taxes, and I should mention in Ottawa that my property taxes just shot up as well. The federal tax burden is close, I believe, to an all-time high in this country. Governments cannot live within our means, and they think that taking the money out of our pocket through some other pretext will somehow make it more bearable. I mean, we've seen, obviously, Mark Carney was looking to do a kind of reboot and enhance productivity and get more investment and get real wages up after a decade of stagnation. But he can't do it because he can't get it into his head that we're overgoverned, and if you're overgoverned, what you have to do is be less governed. He's just not capable of having that thought in his head. And again, you see this like the mayor of Ottawa. He's not a fool and he's not a bad guy, but he's just so conventional in his thinking. And they come to him and say, well, Mr. Mayor, we could cut spending, but, actually we can't. We're just kidding, ha ha ha. But what we can do is keep raising revenue by every imaginable means and wring it out of the citizens. And I mean, one of these trials, the Justice of the Peace told me I had to get a move on because other people were waiting to be convicted. And then afterward, I thanked him for giving me some limited time. And he said, I have all the time in the world for you. It's like, no, you don't. You told me to shut up and pay up so you could get to other people's wallets. It's an extraordinary business. And part of what I say is you should fight these tickets. Fight them peacefully, fight them in a law-abiding way, but make them cost more to collect than the state gets from you. Because if it's really about safety, they won't mind, what price the safety of our children. But if it's secretly a lunge for your cash, like, the one-eyed bandits, and you make it more expensive to collect than it's worth to them, they'll stop doing it.
Yeah, it seems like there's some element of anarcho-tyranny going on because, you put in these speed cameras and they're an easy way, like you say, to capture, capture people going above the speed limit, to collect all these revenues. It's just an easy target. Right. But then on the other hand, we have all this increasing crime all over the country, and these criminals, often violent criminals, get released on bail. But this is the thing that gets focused on. So it just seems a little bit ridiculous. But so we've sort of talked a little bit about your personal experience in this, because obviously you received a whole bunch of tickets and this kicked off this journey and you've been fighting it. What's the situation right now with those tickets? At what stage are you in fighting those tickets?
Well, it was quite a diverting business because the first time I presented a charter defense and the JP told me you have no charter rights in my courtroom. And I thought, gee, it's meant to bring a tear to our eyes on July 1st, but apparently you don't bring that stinking rag into this courtroom. And he convicted me. The next JP listened to the charter argument and said, nope, sorry, hand over your wallet. And then the third one said, hey, you can't bring a charter defense without permission from the Attorney General. And I thought, well, that's a bit odd since the Attorney General is trying to convict me. But then I said, well, how do I do it? And nobody knew, and it took months to figure out. And finally, I had to write to the Attorneys General of Canada and Ontario saying, may I humbly beseech you for permission to bring the Canadian Charter of Rights into a Canadian courtroom. And so then I got to present my charter defense, and the justice is like, yeah, well, whatever, the law is what it is. And so, she was like, well, I have to defer to the law. And I was trying to explain to her, no, the point of the charter is to establish that certain kinds of laws are invalid in this country, but that wasn't going anywhere. So I was, of course, convicted, and now I have to pay up. Actually, that one still has to go to trial. My charter defense was demolished, and then they're still going to have a hearing. But they convict everybody. I've sat through a number of these, and the only two people I ever saw get off were represented by big companies. Everybody else is just convicted, bang, convicted, bang. And you know what else? If you fight the ticket and lose, they charge you more. And they tell you this is not meant to be a disincentive. It's like, who are you kidding? You try telling people if they fight the ticket and lose, they'll get a discount and see how many people fight them. But I still say go in there and take up the court's time. Oh, also, when you go in there, they say, hey, you can go into a breakout room and talk to someone about your chances of getting off. Who do you talk to? A prosecutor, someone who is paid full-time to convict you. And I pointed out that there was a conflict of interest there, and they looked at me like I was from Mars. So basically, you always lose. But if you make it cost them more than it's worth and tear away that orange vest they've stolen and just say, you're in it for the money, aren't you? Well, it's going to take you enough time to convict me of expensive court time that you won't make a profit on the deal. But also, in municipal elections, vote people out who stand for this nonsense, put pressure on the provincial government. Just do not stand for the state robbing you, basically putting on a surtax on driving because they can't control spending. Don't let them do it to you. Traffic tickets should be about safety. And Canadians are into safety. They don't object to traffic tickets for safety. And as I say, if you get pulled over by a live officer who says you were going too fast, you don't feel ill-used. You feel embarrassed. You say, I'm terribly sorry, give me the ticket, and you pay it right away. But these things are doing something very different. They're emptying your pocket for doing something everybody does. And I said this again to the Justice of the Peace. I said, you're going to drive home at the same speed I got ticketed for, and you know it. You go back and forth from work every day, and you don't drive at the speed limit. And so you are actually penalizing me for something you know is not an offense against peace, order, or good government. So don't stand for the hypocrisy, and don't let them profit from this conduct.
Well, as we've seen, even if you do follow the rules, you can still get in trouble if you're following the speed limit, as you should be doing, to bring it back to the beginning of this episode. So where can people find your stuff? And is there things that people should be looking out for in the future coming from you, John?
They should certainly look in the C2C journal for this piece. I've written about it elsewhere, but C2C are the ones that led the way, and I'm grateful to them for doing so. I also write for the National Post, I write for the Epoch Times, and I write a great deal about how government has ceased to trust the citizens, and the police no longer behave like members of the public paid to do what it's incumbent on all of us to do, which would include, we don't all sit around wishing we could stop people going 61 in a 50 zone. And I'm also, believe it or not, a successful YouTuber. The Climate Discussion Nexus, which challenges the conventional wisdom on climate change. We've had over 15 million views, so check us out there as well, please.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, John, for joining me today.
It's been a pleasure.
You heard it from John Robson. If a camera tags you for going a few clicks over, don't just grumble and pay it. Contest it. Use the proper steps available to you. Ask for disclosure. Record the delays. Make it cost more to collect the fine than it's worth. And then vote like it matters. And don't forget to leave a comment telling us all about your speeding camera experiences, because I'm sure a lot of you have them. I'm Melanie Bennett. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.